Today's topic of conversation is my F1 2018 prediction list. Yes, I've been waiting ages to bring out this video. It's been a list I've been working on over the past few weeks. Ever since that Sorokin announcement was made, I started working on this list, and some people like to rush their predictions list, bring it out as quickly as possible with little thought involved. But I've decided to do this a little bit differently. I've always said that predictions are best when they're spiced up a bit, not just your bog standard Mercedes first, Ferrari second, or maybe I have done. Maybe that's with spoilers, but who knows until the end of the video. But I've tried to mix it up a bit. I do think this could happen. It could be seen as a little F1 wish list for this season, perhaps, but I'm confident that I'm going to get it right. And you'll all come back at the end of the season saying, "Oh, F1 reviews, you got it right, well done." And I'll be like, I know I did. Because this is the only predictions you want to be seeing, because these are the right ones. So we might as well put up a spoiler warning, because this is what's going to happen. Anyway, right, let's crack on with it. The Constructors Championship then, everybody. Obviously last year was headed up by Mercedes, and at the back of the field was Sauber. However, we've got a change at the back of the field this year. Coming in 10th place is Toro Rosso. I mean, some people are optimistic about the Italian outfit. However, I think with this new partnership with Honda, I mean, we've seen how Honda have been over the past, how long have they been in the sport now? 4 years, this will be their 4th season. It's not gone well at all at McLaren, and I don't think it'll be any better for Toro Rosso. They might come out of the blocks and say, "Hold up everybody, we've got a decent engine for you this season," but I just don't see that happening. I really don't. And I think Toro Rosso, with the partnership of Gasly and Hartley, which, yeah, actually I reckon it is the worst on the grid, to be quite honest with you. I'm not a fan of either of them in their first few races, though difficult. I think Gasly potentially could change my mind, but Hartley, I think it's probably a drastic decision to have him in the car. I don't think Toro Rosso have any hope of being bottom of the pile. Moving on to number 9 then, another team that you probably wouldn't expect to be so far down the list is Haas F1 team. Now, I say you don't expect, a lot of people are actually pipping them to be last in the championship, but I mean, in retrospect to last season, I don't really think they'll do a good job this season. They've got the same driver lineup of Grosjean and Magnussen, and a wishy-washy season, shall we say, causing lots of incidents, getting on a lot of people's backs, obviously with the Hülkenberg incident being a key one in Hungary. Obviously as well in USA, hitting out both Saubers. Not the most impressive drive, however Grosjean I do rate very highly. So I think they've got an okay driver lineup. However, I think, as you'll see the rest of the trend on this video, I think you'll see engines, the gap between all of them, close right up this season. I really do think that. Obviously FOM are trying to reduce the deficit that engines have and make them not a factor in the sport, or as much of a factor I should say, and I think that trend will really hurt Haas. They could prove me wrong and do a real surge forward. However, I think with the resurgence of McLaren this season and improved Renault this season, Williams I expect to be better this season, Alfa Sauber obviously this season, I think it's going to be really hard for Haas to try and keep up with all of those guys. So that's why they're in the number 9 spot. Number 8 is Alfa Sauber. Up 2 from last season. I'm pretty sure they'd be happy with that. And you know that I wasn't too happy that they got rid of my boy Pascal Wehrlein. But they've got in Charles Leclerc, and I think he is definitely going to be a world champion at some point in the future. I don't even have to have seen one of his F1 races yet. I know he's going to be world champion just from his performances in F2. He was absolutely stunning this season to watch, and I really think he will get into a... I think he actually could get that Ferrari seat, actually. I do. When Raikkonen leaves, presumably at the end of this season, I think Leclerc will get that seat. I really do. But that's another topic of conversation for another video that we will do later on. Ericsson, We don't need Ericsson, he's an alright driver, a bit like Magnussen, neither here nor there, won't make it anywhere, but solid driver. The Alfa Sauber deal I think is very, very interesting. I've done a video about that already. Obviously they're now being sort of cited as the Ferrari B team, although I don't think it'll be quite as literal as the Toro Rosso team is, the sister team to Red Bull. I think they'll be impressive. I think this is a real resurgence that Sauber need, kick up the ass to get back higher up the grid like they used to be in the early 2000s. So that's why they're number 8. Number 7, we have our first big shocker of the evening, or the day, wherever you are right now. It's the boys in pink, it's Force India. I can hear the jaws dropping right now as those words come out of my mouth. The boys in 4th have dropped down to 7th. How's that possible? Well, I'll tell you how that's happened. Renault, McLaren, that Renault engine is going to be decent this season. Like I say, I think the engine gap's going to swole up and be non-existent. Swole up, probably the wrong term to use, but shrink into non-existence. And I think the Force India team, in that lack of budget, I think are going to struggle. I really do. And Williams, I think they'll come up as well. I think Stroll and Sirotkin is a very interesting lineup. Probably not as good as Ocon and Perez, I would say. I think Ocon especially is very, very good, and I think he will definitely do well in the future. But I just think that car will not be able to withstand cars further up the grid. I really do not, and I think if anything, this will be the biggest mistake on my list. It was really hard to place Force India this season, so yeah, it was really, really difficult. But I do think they're going to suffer from the engines getting closer and closer, and from the fact they're a small independent team. I really do, and that's such a shame for Force India. But I do think they're the most variable team on this grid to where they will finish. Moving on to number 6, I think you probably guessed after that little speech about Force India, it's going to be Williams. I think they're going to be so close with Force India this season. I think Renault as well will be in and around that mix, and I think it will definitely vary from race to race this season on what teams are going for points, what teams are fighting near the back, what teams are fighting for the win. It's going to be like the late 2000s, 2007's, 8's, not so much 9, a little bit 9, 2010, multiple teams winning, multiple teams, if not all the teams, scoring points. I really do think that could happen this season, and I think Williams, yes, this is pretty much no better than last season. It's one place lower, in fact. I think the driver lineup, I'm still uncertain, but I think Sirotkin is better than most people are saying, and I think it will be a close fight between Sirotkin, Stroll, Perez and Ocon. I really do. And Williams, it's hard not to love them. It's hard not to love their story, and you've got to fall into that dream of you want them to do well. And I think with Paddy Lowe now on board for a full season, he was there last season, but I believe he did not have full jurisdiction over that car and the decisions that were made. I think they definitely could make improvements. I really do, which which goes against the fact they've gone down in my list from last season. I think it would definitely be a better car, but like I say, I think it's going to be so close this season that despite they'll do a better job, they will fall back, unfortunately, although they will overtake Force India. So, like I say, it's difficult to predict this year, but Williams will be taking that 6th place position. So now we move on to the big top 5. Obviously half the grid is top 5, and in 5th position is Renault. I'm sure that was fairly obvious by this point. Renault will be in that midfield scrap, but the reason I think they'll edge out Williams and Force India, yes, they're a works team, which you have to remember, works teams come with a significantly bigger budget. Really, really they do. And you can just look over the years throughout Formula 1 how many independent teams compared to manufacturer teams have won the World Championship, and you can pretty much see, especially recently, the last time an independent team won the World Championship, well, it's 2009 really, wasn't it, with Brawn. But apart from that, you've got to go back to 97 when Villeneuve won for Williams. So a long, long time since any independent team has won at all. Even Jenson Button, when he won on the Brawn now, it's nearly 10 years ago, 10 seasons ago it was. So I don't think it's going to change anytime soon whatsoever. But the biggest reason I think they'll finish ahead of Force India and ahead of Williams is their driver lineup. I think it's really underrated. Sainz is one of my favourite drivers on the grid, I can't deny that, and I want to be 100% transparent with you guys and girls. Sainz is one of my favourite drivers on the grid, and so is Nico Hülkenberg. And I think they're both great drivers. Sainz is early on in his career, Hülkenberg is later on in his career, but both of them will be really going for this championship as best they can, and I think they will both pick up their first podium of the season this year. Something that no one, I don't think, has predicted, but I think Renault will be up there. Could they challenge for a victory? Well, if we see races like Baku, if we see races like Singapore, they could definitely be in the mix. And, oh, do I do it? Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to predict a win for Sainz and a podium, at least one podium for Hülkenberg, his first podium in the sport. Little extra predictions there. I definitely think that there'll be podiums all round, but we'll chuck out a cheeky one and say Sainz will get one victory. What track? Oh, that's a bit too much to predict, but why not? We might as well just give it a bash, give it a bit of banter. Let's go for the French Grand Prix. Let's just try and wish for a decent first French Grand Prix back on the calendar. That was a bit extreme of me to go through those prediction lengths, but nevertheless, we've chucked it down now, so it's going to have to stay. So that's why Renault will be 5th in the championship. Next team above, who's it going to be? Jaws are going to drop. It's Ferrari. Oh my God, he's not just done that. F1 Reviews has not just put... Has he just done that? He's actually just done that. He's just put Ferrari in 4th. Yes, I have. I have just put Ferrari in 4th. And do you know why I've done that? Not because they'll be any worse than last season. I think other teams will be so much better. The reason they're in 4th is Raikkonen. Raikkonen used to be my favourite driver. I used to adore Kimi Raikkonen when he was at Lotus. He could do nothing wrong in my eyes whatsoever. Even for the end of the season when he refused to race for my boys at Lotus, I still thought, Raikkonen, you are my hero. But the last few seasons, it's just like, he's not there. Yes, he had one okay move all season on Bottas down the Kemmel Straight in Spa, but apart from that, you could have anyone in that Ferrari doing as good a job as Raikkonen, and I probably will get hate for this. Of all the things in this list, I think it'll be the Ferrari decision of why people think this list is incorrect. But I think when you look at the likes of Renault and McLaren and even Red Bull that are going to be stealing more and more victories this season, I think Ferrari are going to be the ones that really suffer because of that Raikkonen decision. And that's also why, which leads on to the fact I think Leclerc will get the seat at Ferrari, because they will need some of that young blood, that fire that Verstappen has, that I think Van Dorn will have, that Sainz has, that even Hamilton and Bottas have more, you know, than the likes. Maybe not Vettel, he wants to prove himself perhaps this year, and Vettel I don't think will have a dreadful season. I really don't think Vettel will have a dreadful season, but I think that Ferrari will suffer with the engine gap shrinking. I mention this a lot because I think a lot of my predictions are based around the engines really closing up, but Ferrari, get rid of Raikkonen or else you're not going to go up higher on my list. So we're down to the final 3. Podium positions, everybody. Where's everyone going to finish? Well, in number 3, it's McLaren. Right, we can't overestimate the dream of McLaren winning the World Championship again, because that's not going to happen, is it? Let's be real here. They've moved away from Honda, but they've not won a race since 2012. Now that's quite some time. They were still using V8 engines back then. And I think for them to go a whole season going from the past 3 DNFing pretty much week in, week out. To be a world champions, that's ridiculous. That's like F1 career mode level of ridiculous that is. That's never going to happen. But I think 3rd, 4th, that sort of area, mixing with the big boys, I think that could happen. And I think that Van Dorn will get his first podium in F1. And I think Alonso will be back on that top step again. I do. I actually do. I think McLaren, like I've just said, I think they will definitely make leaps and bounds by switching to Renault. This was the best decision they made. And Cyril Bitterball, the guy who runs Renault, the top dog of the F1 Renault programme, it was a little interview he did with Channel 4 actually, just before the season ended in Abu Dhabi. Nice, short interview. However, he really did not want to talk about the engines next season, and all he had to say was they were completely changing the engines. And it was this tiny interview, and I can't even remember the exact wording of it. And he really sold me that this Renault engine was going to be something special. And I think, unlucky for him, I think Renault will not be the best team to benefit from this. I think Red Bull and McLaren will, ironically. But that's Renault's loss, and their customer teams' gain. And McLaren, this is the best decision they've made in years. They would have been better with a Mercedes engine, potentially, but I think the Renault engine is pretty much these days just as good as any. I really do. Except the Honda. Don't forget Honda. Honda are trash. You're bad, Honda. I'm not going to go 10 minutes without slating you in this video. Actually, I don't know how long it's been, so it might have been 10 minutes, so you're lucky. You'll get away with that Toro, so you'll get away with it. So, we've only got 2 teams left. 2 big boys in Mercedes and Red Bull. Who's getting second? There you go. Big shock. Right? Were you expecting that? Well, probably how the rest of this video's gone. You probably were. But I bet you weren't before you clicked on this video, were you? Mercedes are second, which means Red Bull are first, obviously, unless you hadn't worked that out, and sorry if I spoiled it. But but Mercedes are second, and once again, this comes down to the fact that all the cars will be so much closer this season. I think the key thing here, though, that will determine the position between Mercedes and Red Bull is the driver lineup, and it's the fact that this season there will be so many more overtakes than last season, alright? So last season, whoa, 5 overtakes in one race. Race of the season. What a great race, right? That won't happen this season. I pray. I pray. The whole F1 world prays. Let's be honest, the whole F1 gods are being begged to make more overtaking. I can tell you that right now. And I think that Hamilton, yes, I think he is potentially one of the best on the grid. One of the best. What is he the best? Am I going to say that? No. I'll stick with one of the best. I think definitely in the top 4. I think I'd definitely put him in my top 4. Maybe I'd put him. Oh, it's difficult. That'll be another conversation. That'll be a definite another conversation. I'm going on so many tangents here today, but I'm loving it. But I think the issue with Mercedes comes at Bottas's door, right? Lots of excuses last season for Bottas. Too many excuses in my opinion. I think he's a great guy. I really do. He's definitely one of the nicest guys on the F1 grid. Just judging by what he portrays on the media, through TV, through social media. Seems like such a nice guy to work with. But he just doesn't seem clinical enough on track. I mean, the excuse was last season is that that car was not built for him. It was built for Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, not Valtteri Bottas. I'm not too sure on that, to be perfectly honest. I don't think that's 100% the case. I really don't. But this season he's going to have to really up his game. And many people are predicting that he'll be out the door at the end of this season. I'm not too sure about that myself. But it will all depend on how he performs this season and where he is in contention to his teammate. But, like I say, Red Bull will be number 1. And the reason is, Danny Rick and Max Verstappen are definitely in my top 4 of best drivers on the grid. And on their day, I definitely think they could both be the best driver on their grid. Obviously this season, Ricciardo only with the 1 win in Baku, which was definitely down to circumstance, nothing to do with Red Bull's being the best car that weekend. But I think both of them are fantastic drivers. You've seen moves, both of them throughout their career constantly. There's never been a season where either of those two drivers have disappointed. Even when Ricciardo first came to Red Bull in 2014, he wiped the floor with Sebastian Vettel. He completely did. And that was when, at the time, when I didn't rate Vettel very highly. I still don't. Even after last season, he's not blown me away completely, even though he's a four-time world champion. I'm saying some very controversial stuff today, and I don't know where this is coming from. But he didn't blow me away completely as Sebastian Vettel ever. And when Ricciardo came to Red Bull, yes, that was when Danny Ric really came onto the scene for most people. I did enjoy him at Toro Rosso, actually. I don't know why, but I remember having a bet with my dad about who would be the next biggest star. And this was back in 2013, and I said Danny Ric, right? And he got that move to Red Bull the following season. And so I've always had a little soft spot for Danny Ric. So, I mean, don't we all though? Let's be quite honest. And how he doesn't win Personality of the Year with the Autosport Awards, I'm still not too sure. But back onto the topic at hand, yes, Red Bull will be world champions because that car will be insane again with an Adrian Newey design, and with a better Renault engine, they will be up there with the best two drivers on the grid, the best driver pairing. Oh, it's just such a dream for Red Bull, and they will be back on top as the Constructors World Champions. Okay, I was thinking about leaving this for another video, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna do the Constructors and the drivers all in one video, in the hope that my voice doesn't break down after all this talking, but we'll go along with it anyway. The Drivers' World Championship. I've done it down from 20th down to 1st. Let's get in with the bottom 5. There you have it. I mean, it's pretty similar to my Constructors list, really. You've got the two Toro Rosso drivers at the bottom, Hartley at the complete bottom. Magnussen is then next. Obviously, I said I'm not a huge fan of Magnussen. Then Ericsson, I said I'm not a huge fan of Ericsson. I think they're both bog standard. And then Grosjean, I think, will be in 16th. And I think that'll be not because Grosjean's a bad driver, but I think because that Haas is going to be absolutely dog this season. So points will be very lacking for those teams and those guys there in the bottom 5. So that's why they are all there in that list. I don't think there's any major shockers there. Perhaps Magnussen in 18th, people won't be too happy about. And I definitely think that there'll be some driver switches in the season. I really do believe that. Obviously this season, did we have 4 drivers come in? Giovinazzi we had. Oh, and then Gasly, Hartley, Button, DeRestas. That's 5. 5 extra drivers we had this season. And I think that will definitely be the case. Once again, this season, I think you'll be looking at Toro Rosso, maybe Haas, maybe Alfa Sauber, and maybe Williams for those changes. I think if they're going to come from anywhere, I think Williams with Kubica, putting him in a seat, I think they're keen to do. I do believe that. So I definitely think, just going off a bog standard bottom 5, this will be the bottom 5. Let's move on to the next 5, 15th to 11th. There you go. I mean, once again, not really two huge surprises considering my Constructors list. Perhaps the biggest surprise there is Stroll beating out Ocon and Perez. Like I say, I was quite impressed with Stroll, and I think he definitely did some drives that went under the radar. Obviously, everyone thinks of Monza and Canada, where he got his first points, and Baku, where he got his first podium. Has great drives in his career. But if you actually look at races like Austria, where he started at the back of the field, worked his way up into the point. You look at Abu Dhabi, where he defended against Romain Grosjean like an absolute pro, and Grosjean, who has been on the podium, almost won races, been up there in title fights, really. Not quite title fights, but early on title fights, we shall say. I think Stroll did a great job there as well. So, really, I think he could do it. I think that Williams car, like I said earlier as well, will be better than the Force India, and that will help out Stroll, and that's why I've put him in 11th, just outside the top 10. The interesting thing as well is I've put Ocon ahead of Perez. Again, I think Ocon will progress this season. You saw In the second half of this season, he did much better than Perez. Perez had the first half, Ocon had the second half, and maybe that was because Perez lost his head a bit. Look at Belgium, that was ridiculous of Perez squeezing his teammate into the wall. I couldn't believe that when I was watching that on TV. I really couldn't. That was insane of Perez. It's not the first time we've seen him do these little dirty antics. Not all the time, and all the drivers do them, pretty much, most of them, 99%. But I think this season he lost his head in that second half, and I think it's because he's not got this big drive. He doesn't have this big seat he's been looking for in all his career. He had his chance at McLaren, he blew it. And so I think he's now venting his frustration that Ocon's going to overtake him in the pecking order. So I think that will continue this season, and we'll start to see the demise of Sergio Perez's career this season as well. Top 10. Are you ready? I don't think you are. There you go. Oh my god, my eyes are bleeding. What is this? Oh my, Raikkonen in 10th. He's got it in for Raikkonen this year. Vettel in 6th. What is this? Bottas 7th. The Mercedes in 7th. We can't have that. Oh my god. Yep, that's the list. I've spent ages doing this list, so don't slate it. But that's what I've finally come up with. For reasons I said earlier, Raikkonen's lost it. Raikkonen's just not got the interest anymore. It'll be his final season, and it'll be a shame to go out in this manner. I think I've noticed with Raikkonen, if it's tracks he likes, so Monaco, Spa, he does sick, right? If he's enjoying his weekend, he goes back to the old Raikkonen. And there's points in the season when you're thinking, you know what, Kimmy, why don't you show this form all season? And I wish he did, obviously. I wish he did show it all the time. So, could we see a potential win from Raikkonen? I think if we had a Baku incident, we could. And that would be a great time for him to leave his career at Ferrari and his Formula 1 career if we did get a win. But it's very unlikely. And where I've tipped Sainz to get a win, I don't think Raikkonen will. So that's why Raikkonen's there. Hülkenberg in 7th, 8th and 9th. Really just why I said about them being in the Constructors so high, just that that's such a great pairing. Renault will be so much higher on the grid this season. Sainz ahead of Hülkenberg. It's just because I rate Sainz as a driver higher than I do Hülkenberg really, but I think that will be a really close battle. And then Bottas and Vettel, really the top 7 drivers were really hard to choose what order I wanted. And I definitely think 7th, 6th and 5th will be very, very close. But I just wanted to spice it up a tiny bit, make that little extra shock factor by putting Vettel and Bottas in 6th and 7th. Though, like I said earlier, Bottas, I don't think he's quite got the drive that Hamilton does, that Alonso, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Van Dorn, Vettel, even Sainz has. He's got to prove me wrong as Bottas, and I think he can easily move any of the drivers, like I say, from 7th up to about, well, from 7th to 1st really. They could switch, but this is the list I've gone with because I don't think Bottas is quite as good as the rest of them. Vettel in 6th, I think this because I don't think the Ferrari will be quite as quick, and I don't think Vettel has quite that hunger that the other drivers in front do. All of them in front of Vettel have goals to be chasing. Right, they've all got aspirations of winning their first World Championship, aspirations of getting the team back on top, aspirations of having the most World Championships of all time. And Vettel, he doesn't quite seem to have that. Although he's a full-time world champion himself, like Hamilton, Vettel's never mentioned anything like that. I don't think he really cares about statistics or records quite like other drivers do. I think Vettel just wants to get the job done. And I think there's potential he could win a couple of races, but I don't think he'll just about make it into that top 5. Right. Oh, we're getting to the business end now, the real business end. This video, Jesus, if I had ads. I don't have ads, obviously, because of Logan Paul. I don't know why I've put him in my video now. That is dreadful. Anyway, top 5. In 5th place is Stoffel Van Dorn. So, Stoffel, the Belgian. Bet you didn't expect him in 5th. I think he really did perform well this season, and I definitely think it went under the radar because drives like Silverstone, you probably know I went this year to Silverstone, sat in the Beckett's grandstand, and Van Dorn, he was on fire that weekend. I don't know where he started, but I know he finished 11th, and I was so gutted that he didn't get these points. He was overtaking all over the place, and when I rewatched the race, when I came home and watched it obviously on Channel 4, nothing of Van Dorn whatsoever, not even a mention for Driver of the Day. And when I was there live, I was in awe of this man, how quick he was in this trash McLaren around Silverstone, and it was so unfair on him. And you look at performances, Singapore, bit unfair, but on several occasions he out-qualified Alonso and outraced Alonso. And Alonso, it was difficult this season. Obviously at the beginning there was all that controversy about was he retiring the car, all this, that and the other. But did you ever hear Van Dorn complain? Did you ever see Van Dorn parking up that car? No, you didn't. He just got on with it. If he had an issue, he might have made a remark saying, "Oh guys, this quite ain't right," but nowhere near as much. Even Grosjean complained more than Van Dorn. And Grosjean's in a Haas and Van Dorn's had a Honda powered car. So that really just puts it on the map. He is a GP2 World Champion, and when he was World Champion, he stomped that. He did. I was at Spa 2015 when he won his home Grand Prix. And once again, I was in awe of how quick he was, how far ahead he was of the rest of the field. So Van Dorn, not as high as his teammate, but still a very respected 5th place. Top 4 then. Someone's going to miss out on that podium, and it's going to be Max Verstappen. Right. Once again, I find myself having to explain why he's a bit further down than probably you would have expected at this point. I think, perhaps out of this whole list, I think Max Verstappen in 4th is the most realistic thing to happen. I'm like 100% confident he's going to get 4th. I actually am. I do faultlessly believe that. I think he's an extremely talented driver, winning 2 races last season, a race in the season before, and the season before that, he was his rookie season, right? I think the reason he won't be as high as his teammate, as high as Fernando Alonso, is that he's rash. He is. Last season we didn't get to see it, but you think back to 2015, yes, you could argue that's a bit too far back, when he was having that incredible race in Monaco. On the brakes too late, he was right into the back of Grosjean and into the wall. I think he just has that tendency of just being a little too aggressive. Obviously in 2016 we had all that controversy about him moving in the braking zone. This season obviously there was nowhere near as much overtaking, and when he did overtake he was spectacular. But I think compared to the front 3, I don't think he's anywhere as consistent as a driver as those guys. But I think on his day, Verstappen can definitely be the best driver on the grid. So it was a difficult one again with Verstappen. However, I don't think he'll quite bring the consistency that Red Bull will be looking for, despite the claims that he is their #1 driver this season. However, I don't think that'll be the case. Podium position then, everybody. Podium position. Who's going to get 3rd? It's Fernando Alonso. Not quite that World Championship dream he's probably expecting and wanting, but I think it'll be enough to make him stay another season. He will win a race this season. He will win multiple races. He is a world-class driver. He really is. He's doing the Daytona 24 hours, and I think if he can stay focused on F1 this season, he will be up there. That McLaren will be so much better this season. He has the drive to bring this team back to the front. That's why he joined, to try and make McLaren a winning team again. But obviously, as we know, that's just not happened, does it? It really has not happened. They've gone further back, if anything. So, yeah, really unlikely that he will finish 1st. Unlikely he'll finish 2nd. But 3rd, I think Fernando has the talent to definitely be able to do. There's no way he's going to win his 3rd World Championship. Imagine that as well. Going from your last World Championship in 2006 all the way to 2018 for your next World Championship. That would be the record for the longest distance between championships, I'm pretty sure. And that would be pretty insane, but I really don't see that happening. I think that's just a bridge too far for McLaren. However, I think Alonso definitely has the skill and talent to be able to pull that car up into third in the championship. So, tension's kicking in now, alright? There's only 2 drivers left. I won't tell you who they are. I'll let you just think about it. I'm sure you all know who they both are. But who's going to get that second place? Lewis Hamilton is going to get that second place. Yes. I can just hear the fanboys whacking their keyboards right now. Oh my god, how have you done this? Hamilton's going to win. Well, I just don't think the Mercedes will be as good this year. Alright, that's the main reason. And I honestly think that Hamilton, although he's really pushing for this goal, I don't quite think that Mercedes will be at the pinnacle of the sport that they have been in the rest of the V6 era. I know that's a very controversial statement, but once again, this whole thing's been controversial, isn't it? So we couldn't finish it off with a lovely, juicy, controversial end, could we? But we might as well announce it now, while we're here. World Champion 2018 is the boy Daniel Ricciardo. I'm going to pip for the World Champion this season. I don't think anyone in the world of Formula 1 has predicted that. And I'm going to be the only one that's right. Ricciardo will have arguably the best car. I think he's probably the most complete driver on the grid, in my opinion. He's not my favourite driver. I think he's one of the nicest guys on the grid. I think he's one of the quickest drivers, one of the most consistent drivers, incredible at overtaking, and he's so underrated, despite so many people rate him highly. You know, even in the Red Bull programme, announcing Verstappen as #1, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Yes, Verstappen has age on his side, but Ricciardo is so much more of a complete driver, in my opinion, despite only winning 1 race last season compared to Verstappen's 2. And I think that consistency, that drive to finally win a first World Championship, obviously it's his last year at Red Bull on his current contract, and it looks like he could go to Mercedes for 2019, maybe Ferrari for 2019. I think he'll want to get the job done at Red Bull, and I think if there's no contract woes and they can get that sorted out early on in the season, then there's no doubt in my mind, if Red Bull bring that package that I'm predicting them to do, Daniel Ricciardo will be your 2018 World Champion. Whoa, what a video! Jesus, that was a long one, everybody. If you've actually managed to stick through this whole thing, congratulations. If you skip to the end, well, cheers for doing it. I mean, at least you know who I think is going to be World Champion, don't you? So, I suppose that's a win. I suppose that's what most people come here for, to see the World Champion. So, hey, Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. I can't really complain about that. If you're new to the channel, we post all sorts of F1 news and drama, as well as all the other formulas and motorsport. Formula E generally is the secondary one on this channel. A really huge growing sport is Formula E, and I'm trying to focus on that a little bit because I don't think it gets enough attention as other formulas. As I said, if you have enjoyed the video, it'd be great if you could drop a subscribe. We would be so much appreciated, especially after, you know, I've put out my voice in this video. You know, I'm not going to be able to speak for another 3 days after this. I'm going to have to get used to this if I'm going to do it every season. But guys, as always, remember to like, subscribe, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.